Hey guys, it's Kayla. I'm the customer success manager from Scholar, and today I am joined by Dr. Zach Miller. He is a veterinarian that has practiced for many years in private practice on small animals, and he has also worked in the animal health industry for many years. Thank you for joining us, Zach.
Hi, Kayla. Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm excited for our conversation, and hopefully, I can answer some of these questions and be a service to pet owners and your team. So I'm excited.
Well, first, you have a lot of experience with different medications for flea and tick treatments. And
Mhm.
I know there's a bunch of different types, topicals, chewables, collars. You know, first of all, do you have a personal preference?
I do not, and the reason is because it's really based on what's best for the pet owner and what their needs are. And for the most part, all these products are either approved by the FDA or EPA, and so we know they work, whether it's a topical, collar, or an oral. And so then it because since we have three options now, what best fits the owner, the dog's lifestyle, previous history, so there's a lot that goes into it. So usually instead of just saying, here's product A, see you later, you try to, you want to learn about
Yeah,
maybe
of
the
course.
owners, is the owner super busy? Are they forgetting doses? Does the dog have a finicky stomach? Do they tend to vomit up pills?
Mhm.
That sort of thing. So I think the main thing is to think about what works best for the owner or the pet, and just think about what their lifestyle is. And I'll give you a couple examples. So for example, if you have a dog that it's a big swimmer, right? It goes out, maybe it hunts, it jumps in creeks. A topical product might not be best because some of those products can actually wash off the skin and coat. So in those
Oh, yeah,
situations,
that makes sense.
yeah, so in those situations, an oral pill might be better because those ingredients stay inside the dog.
Mhm.
Now, let's say you have a dog that just has a sensitive stomach and tends to vomit stuff, or the owner just doesn't like doing pilling. In those situations, a topical or collar product would probably be better. So I think the main thing is the vast majority of products out there are effective. They have safety profiles, and to base your decision kind of around what's best for that unique owner and pet.
Okay, good to know. I didn't even think about the swimming thing, but that definitely makes sense that you would want something that isn't going to wash off.
Yeah, so in general, as topicals and collars, when you apply them on the pet, they kind of hop in our skin oils, just like we have skin oils, pets have skin oils, and so they'll kind of use those oils to spread out over the coat, and that's the waterproof area, so to speak, and so they tend to kind of stay locked in. They're not going to wash off a whole lot, but it's those dogs that do bathe a lot or go swimming a lot.
Mhm.
That's where some of the medication on top can maybe wash off a little bit.
Yeah, and especially if you're outside a bunch doing things
Mhm.
like that, you really want that protection.
Mhm. For sure.
Okay, cool. That definitely makes a lot of sense. Okay, so Zach, can you actually give us a little bit of information about, how flea maintenance has evolved over time and let's say the 60s compared to how it is now?
Yeah, so and this kind of caveats into what we were talking about. Most of the products out there today are pretty darn effective,
Mhm.
and they make our lives easier. So if we go back in time a little bit, and maybe into the 60s, I think we didn't have a whole lot of tools in our arsenal to combat fleas and ticks. It was not the best. So we now take it for granted how good we have it. But back in the day, um, you would have to rely on either these harsh chemical baths, bathing your pet. You might have to spray your house. You might have to put flea or insecticidal powder on your pet,
Mhm.
and it, a lot of it revolved on treating the environment, and that's evolved. Um, so that was kind of the way it was until 60s, 70s, 80s, and then in the 90s, in the mid 90s, they started coming out with these topical products,
Mhm.
and they were Advantage and your frontline products. And what was cool about them is they totally evolutionized flea control because um, now you're able to kill fleas that jump on the pet, and they're killing fleas so fast they can't reproduce. So if you're having fleas that are dying before they can lay eggs, you're well ahead of the game now in terms of getting rid of that flea infestation. And
Got it.
so then, yeah,
Stop
so then,
before it happens.
yeah, yeah. So that really was a game changer. And once those fleas are dying and aren't laying eggs, you don't necessarily have to call the exterminator or put a huge tent over your house for a flea fogging. So it really revolutionized how we go about things. Then the next kind of stage was probably, a couple of years after, and it's really gotten big in the 2010s and afters, is oral products,
Okay.
oral flea and tick products. So your NexGard, Bravectos, Cordelios. And so those are nice because it gave you another option, right? So these are orals. It's maybe a little bit more convenient depending on your pet or lifestyle. And then in 2013, Seresto appeared.
And Seresto is a collar, right?
Yeah, so it's a collar, and what's different about that is it doesn't have the stigma or the negativity of some of the collars way back in the day. So they were often greasy.
Yeah.
They smelled. They might have been hard to put on, and it wasn't a good experience. So this one has kind of got some newer technology in it. It's got a different kind of ingredients in it. And so it's just, if we look at the progression of flea and tick control from the past to where we are now, we have it made pretty darn good. And we can focus our treatments on treating the pet and not so much as these harsh chemicals in our house and all of that sort of stuff. So it's kind of been neat just to kind of look back and just see kind of how we've gone and maybe what's next down the future. So
now the treatments are much more preventative as opposed to a reactive treatment responding to the infestation. You can really stop it in its tracks before it happens.
Yeah, and the key thing is these products, they'll work for 30 days, some 3 months, some 8 months. So as long as you have that long duration type effect, you're going to always having one, being able to protect the dog, but also be killing these fleas before they can lay eggs.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's awesome. I'm glad that we don't have to flea bomb houses anymore. That would be pretty inconvenient. Moving on to a scary statistic that I just heard about, that in 1 month, 10 fleas can go from 10 fleas can go from 10 to 250,000 fleas in a month.
Mm-hmm.
First of all, that's terrifying to think about, that there are that many fleas.
Yeah.
Second, how and when does that happen? Is that kind of like a gradual growth over a month span? Is that something that kind of like is a little bit of a growth and then grows exponentially? Do you have any information about what that looks like?
Yeah, so I think if anyone's familiar with compound interest, so the more money you have, the more it's going to kind of keep growing and keep growing. So it's kind of the same way with fleas and flea eggs. So when a flea or fleas initially land on a pet, they're going to do basically 3 things over and over and over and over for their entire life. They're going to, and it's going to be in this order, they're going to blood feed, they're going to mate, and then they're going to lay eggs. And all that happens right on the pet. And so some alarming stats are kind of, we talk about once that flea's on a dog or a cat, it's going to start laying eggs. And some of those numbers could be 50 eggs a day. And so if you think about it, the average flea can maybe live 2 to 3 months on a pet. And so if we're doing 25 to 50 eggs a day, we're getting into some serious compound interest type stuff. And usually the main focus in the vet clinic that we try to educate owners on is, once you see a flea on your pet, it's too late, one, because that flea is probably the result of flea eggs that have already been in that pet's environment for a few months. So by that point, it's kind of, you can't really catch it early. So the 250,000, that's already set. So now you're kind of playing defense, you're playing catch up. And when I say surroundings, that could be anywhere in the house, and it can be in your yard. So where does the pet frequent? Does it spend a lot of time on the couch, in your bed, on a rug somewhere? Those are the places that these flea eggs are going to be falling off the pet and developing into fleas that will then jump on the dog and just repeat that cycle over. So Typically, you can't really catch it early. Once you start seeing fleas, it's important to realize it's not the end of the world, but you're going to need to do some work to play catch up. So,
Okay, so if you see a flea, it's too late. So it is important to do flea maintenance before you start seeing them around. So are there any tips and tricks? Of course, be consistent with your medication. But are there any other tips and tricks that you could recommend for pet owners to kind of keep up that flea maintenance?
yeah, I mean, the main thing is just be aware of, I mean, obviously, fleas are not going to be as much of a risk in colder months or in colder parts of the country. Um, One important thing to think about, though, is the what the temperature and humidity levels inside a house
Mhm.
or home that we are most comfortable at, like 70% or 70 degrees relative humidity in our house. Those are actually the exact same conditions fleas thrive in. So it worked out pretty good for them because there's homes and indoor dwellings everywhere, and it's just ideal for them. So the main thing is, if it's summer or fall and that pet brings some fleas in and those flea eggs get in the house, they might take up to 6 months to fully finish their flea life cycle. So you could still be dealing with the flea infestation well into winter. And it would be very odd because at first it's kind of like, it's winter. Why is this happening? And
Yeah,
the whole reason it's happening is because those eggs were already found inside the house.
got
The main thing is, I mean, people have all different ways to remember things. So they might have a phone app, they might just have something on their calendar. There are callers that last a long time,
it. Hmm.
6, 8 months. So that takes that whole forgetful component just completely out of the picture. Trying to think a little bit what else, but I think that's just the main thing is
Hmm.
you got to find out what works for you. I mean, some clinics now are able to do emails to your phone or text to your phone. So there's a lot of options to kind of stay on top. But despite all that, there's still going to be misses and falling behind, of course.
Yeah.
That's just the reality of the situation.
So main thing is to keep up with the treatments and then also remember that fleas are not a seasonal problem. They are going to be an issue all year round that you have to maintain and take care of.
Yeah, I mean, just because you're not seeing fleas and it's cold out and your dog or pet seems fine, that doesn't mean a whole lot because once things start to warm up, if there's any flea stages around, well, they're going to get going. And now you're going to be February, March. Now you're going to have that full blown flea infestation on board.
Yeah.
So if you think about it, it's kind of like um, just being proactive and being just kind of maintaining it. Keep things good while it's good, and don't wait for things to get bad and then
Yeah.
react. So
Okay. That definitely makes sense. Okay, Zach, what advice do you have for pet parents who, maybe missed a couple steps or maybe just haven't ever done any sort of treatments at all, and now they find themselves in the midst of a flea infestation? What What are your go-to piece of advice for that?
yeah, so the first thing is just kind of what we've talked about. It's not the dog's fault. It's not your fault. It's just the way it is. And, your dog might be confused if you kind of change some of your behaviors, like, you're covered in fleas. I don't want to be close to you right now. Yeah. Yeah. So just kind of be aware of that sort of stuff as well. But so pet owners that are facing a flea infestation, and they want to have a couple things to be aware of is expectations. This isn't going to clear up overnight, and it's probably going to take several months down the road. Not to be scary, but this is kind of realistic. And once you get a product on, you probably won't see fleas as much, and it should be that kind of the slow decline. But you have to keep the treatment up for those stages that are off the pet and still developing your house. So
Yeah.
what you would typically say would, number one is we want to get the fleas off the pet fast, ASAP. And so that can be either let's give a shampoo just to knock them all down. They have some fast acting flea pills that work in a few hours just to kind of get that just to kind of get that knockdown. They don't have they're not going to be preventatives. They don't have any residual effect, but let's get these fleas off our pet now.
Okay.
And then, so once you have done something like that, your next strategy is pretty soon after, you want to get a preventive product on board. And that can be these orals, topicals, or a collar. And you
Mm-hmm.
want to keep that product on board for a while. If it's a monthly, you don't want to give it every month. If it's a long-acting collar, you just want to make sure that collar is on, because it's going to take several months to eventually clear the infestation out. And I'm pretty confident most people that have had an infestation and dealt with it in the past, they kind of learned the hard way, and they're going to be preventers and they're going to understand the importance of treating year round and having treatment on board year round and how important that is.
Yeah.
But I think the main thing is expectations,
Mm-hmm.
perspective. It's going to be a while, and it's okay if you still see fleas on your pet from time to time. It's okay. That's part of the process. And then there's a few other things you can do around your house that can help. Vacuuming, vacuuming your carpet, cleaning your sheets, maybe opening some windows. Fleas kind of dry out in sunlight, so maybe kind of getting some sunlight
It's
exposure.
vampires.
Yeah. And then so just kind of going on a cleaning mission, and you might want to do that once a week, a couple times a week. They do have some foggers or insecticidal sprays, kind of like what you use for bed mites.
Okay.
So you might want to go there. But and then the other important thing, and this often gets forgotten, is you want to treat every pet in the home. If you're only treating one pet, you're wasting your time and you're wasting your money, because that other pet is going to be continually being infected or infested with fleas. Those fleas are going to be continually laying eggs in the house again. So you're in this cycle of not actually doing anything, right?
Yeah.
You're just kind of caught in this endless cycle. So it's really important to make sure all pets are being treated. If you're only treating one, that's not going to work. So
Yeah. Because you mentioned that, most fleas aren't actually on the pet, right? The ones you see on the pet are there, but then they're all over your house as well.
yeah, so only the adults are on your pet, and those adult fleas are not ever going to get off your pet. But what those adult fleas are going to be doing is laying eggs like crazy, and then those eggs are going to fall off your pet and go wherever your pet goes in the house. And you can't see the eggs, you can't see these developing stages. So it's just really, it's really important to know these things when going after a flea infestation. And it's never a bad thing to call a veterinary clinic and ask for advice. I don't, they're happy to talk with you and just kind of give you some perspective, and then call friends, ask what worked, what didn't work. But I think just knowing, it's kind of those three things: treat every pet, probably clean up the environment a little bit, and be patient. It's not going to go away overnight. So I think that would be my kind of advice and go-tos right there.
Okay, cool. That's awesome. Okay, the last thing that I wanted to talk about are ticks.
Mm-hmm.
Living in a city, that's not something I generally think about, but I know that ticks they actually exist in every single US state, so they aren't they're not something that's just a locational problem.
Mm-hmm.
So do you have any advice or information about where people need to be concerned about ticks? Like if I'm walking a dog just down the city block, is that something I need to worry about versus taking them to a park? I mean, hiking for sure, but where do people need to worry about running into ticks with their animals?
Yeah, so it's important to kind of know what the tick way of getting on a pet. And so a lot of people, I think, might think they hop or they fall out of trees. But the reality, they don't at all. For the most part, they climb up on grass or other vegetation and then will cling onto a pet or you as you're moving through things. There are instances where they can maybe crawl toward a paw or a laying down animal, but that's not that common. But the main takeaway is ticks are everywhere, even in cities. And with houses now and cities now encroaching more on previous forests or wildlife areas with deer and mice, birds are a big spreader too, in that ticks really don't care what they're feeding on. I mean, they'll have preferences, but they'll happily jump on your dog, your cat, a mouse. So if we think about it, like deer can transport ticks, birds can transport ticks.
Okay.
So there's not really this kind of safe zone. But general, if you go out for walks, if you go to the dog park, just if your dog has a backyard and kind of goes out and likes to kind of crawl around things, there's always going to be that risk for
Right.
ticks. So, and ticks are a little different than fleas in that you're not really worried as much about this huge infestation, so to speak. You're more worried about just trying to kill them on your pet as quickly as possible, or just physically removing them. And so that's kind of the main concern with ticks.
Do you have any advice for pet owners? So you said like they are in backyards, they are in cities. So if, let's say, someone's dog does go outside, runs around, rolls around, plays in the backyard, comes back in, what should be some general tick maintenance that owners should be doing?
So one perceived myth is that if you give a tick product, whether it be a topical oral or a collar, it's going to be this protective bubble and the pet's never going to get ticks again. That's not actually reality.
Okay.
And so no product's 100%, right? And ticks are just tricky. You're combating a bunch of different species. They all have different techniques of how they infest pets and kind of their behaviors on the pet. So it's important to keep that in mind. And so, yes, having a tick product on board is your number one. But keep in mind, they're not always 100%, and you're probably going to see ticks regardless. So after walks, trips hiking, probably just in general, a good habit is to do a tick check, just like people do tick checks. Pet your dog, look around the ears, the feet, the eyes. Same thing with your cat, and just kind of, as you're petting them, just kind of keep a lookout, know what to look for. So that's always, a good habit to be in. You can't just give the product and think homework's done.
I'm done. My job's done. I'm good.
Yeah. So that's important, just to have those proper expectations when it comes to tick control. And then if you do see a tick, it's not the end of the world, but you're going to want to try to remove it, regardless if your pet has protection on. And there's lots of YouTube videos, but the main thing is, your oil or a match or all these tails usually are not the way to go about it and make the problem worse. So learning how to remove that tick is very important. Well, and then environment control too of your backyard, keeping things trimmed, cleaning up kind of gunk, debris, leaf litter, that sort of things. Also, it's important to think about, and this is true for fleas too, wildlife, right? So if you see kind of deer, rabbits, foxes, raccoons, those pets can all carry fleas and ticks as well. And so if you live in a wooded area and you see those animals frequently, or if you live in the city, foxes are everywhere. They're in cities, they're in the country. Those are always a risk. Not that they will directly transfer a flea or tick to your pet, but a tick can be feeding on a fox, fall off, finish its next stage of development, and then infest you or your dog. When you go out. So plugging fence lines, making sure everything's neat and tidy, those things can go a long way as a proactive approach to kind of help. But I think the main overarching message, no product's 100%, and it's not the end of the world if your pet does have a tick or you see a tick on them after you've had a product on board. Doesn't mean the product's not working.
Okay, cool. Well, that makes me feel a little bit less safe in the city, but it is definitely good for pet owners to know that it's just something they need to watch out for.
And there's actually one kind of tick. So most ticks are outdoors, right? That's where they're going to pick them up. People, pets, that's where most often they're going to pick them up. There is one kind of tick actually that prefers indoor dwellings. So it's fun, right? So this particular tick is found all over the U.S. and it's called the brown dog tick, and it's notorious for setting up infestations. It's the one tick that kind of does have infestation issues.
Oh gosh, this is not boding well.
Yeah, in garages, kennels, homes. So it's just another thing to be aware of. Not to be a scare tactic, not to not have a pet or anything like that, but just to kind of be aware. It's more of an outdoor problem, but there are some ticks that prefer indoors. And so just if you see a tick inside on your wall or on your floor, that's okay. That's just how it is, Nature finds a way, I guess, right?
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. I mean, I think after speaking with you, it's really clear that, these kind of scary facts of like the 10 fleas to 250,000, or, some ticks do reside inside, is really just about maintaining your space, maintaining the regimen, whatever it is that your pet is on. And, just being aware in the back of your mind that that's something that you should be focusing on and you should be directing some attention to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And at the end of the day, pets are probably going to get a flea or tick no matter what happens, no matter what you do. It's not, just not necessarily about what you did or didn't do. It's just a dog being a dog. It's nature being nature. And that's just part of having a pet and being a kind of a pet owner who has that has the perspective and understands what goes on with getting an animal. You're going to have those road bumps, and again, it's nothing you did. That's just the nature of pet ownership. And so it's important to have that perspective, I think.
Yeah.
Links for everything discussed in today's episode in the description box below.